Hello, everybody, and welcome to this emergent session on collective action. So we've got, it looks like 18 people in the crowd. That's good. So this is, I guess, supposed to be a fairly casual discussion. We've got about sort of 9 or 10 people joining to be on screen, and then I'm hoping that it can be a bit interactive with people in the crowd, so that we can get people to sort of suggest ideas for campaigns and that sort of thing. What we'll be doing later is running a poll based on various ideas, and then getting people to vote on what they think we should workshop. And then we as a group will just sort of chat about it and try and work out some parameters, just as a kind of window into the campaign creation process. And then hopefully this can inspire other people to go out and think about other campaigns that they might like to post on the platform. So on that note, I thought I would give an introduction to the platform. And I see we've got a few more people joining here. Welcome, Danielle. Welcome, Tom, when you get here. So I thought I would start off with an introduction to the project and sort of the thinking on where it's come from. And then I would throw it over to the panel to discuss, sort of bring up any ideas that they have, introduce themselves, and then potentially suggest one behaviour that they would like to see change in academia. And while we're doing this, it would be good if people in the crowd could also start thinking about specific behaviours that they would like their community or our community to adopt or to change, because then we can put them into the poll and we can start voting on those down the track for as campaigns that we can work on. So in my mind, the main obstacle in progressing academia is not technical, and this has been written about before. The main obstacle really is a cultural problem. And I think probably the best example to look at this is the open access movement. When open access was started in 2002, the idea was that we should just really be able to use the internet to its fullest capabilities and drastically reduce costs, increase speed, and increase access to our research. And I think the fact that it's almost 20 years later and we're only really just starting to make progress on that front with Plan S and kind of big movements like that shows how sluggish the system is and how much cultural inertia there is that we have to overcome. And for me, I guess a sort of poignant example is open access journals. Like in many fields, there have been really great examples of progressive journals that are free to publish and free to read and community owned, but unfortunately, they don't tend to get the level of support that they could otherwise get. And in many ways, that's because we're kind of trapped by this sort of impact-based paradigm that we're under. And what it means is that the established journals that have a high impact factor, by virtue of them being seen as prestigious, receive all of our best work, and therefore it becomes this kind of self-reinforcing cycle where they become high impact by virtue of the fact that they're high impact. And it means that new entrants to the market, like behavior data analysis and theory, which Danielle will introduce in a bit, can find it really hard to get those articles submitted to them that would otherwise build their reputation. So this kind of a problem is known as a collective action problem, and it's been written about and studied extensively. And there are a number of solutions to this type of problem, but probably the most obvious one for us is known as collective action. And this idea is definitely not new. You can think of any workers' strike as being collective action. If one person was to go on strike, then they would just get fired. But if everybody goes on strike together, then you can make an impact and create change. And in more modern contexts, this idea has been developed along the lines of platforms like Kickstarter or CollAction, which basically just harness the internet to collect these types of pledges to take action. And then once they reach the critical mass that's necessary, then everybody takes action together. And basically, this is the concept that Free Our Knowledge is trying to achieve in academia. So the general idea is that you can anyone can create a campaign that interests them. Then you outsource that campaign to the crowd, to our community, and hopefully people sign and agree to take some action that's specified in the campaign. And then at that point, you're not asked to do anything yet, because the idea is to protect those vulnerable among us, like early career researchers, who don't feel that they can currently take action in the way that they would like to. But then over time, hopefully you reach the threshold that's been predetermined. And once you reach that threshold, everybody acts together. And so what that looks like on the platform would be, we would list everybody who has signed this campaign, and then we would direct them to go out and carry out the action. Now, the idea is that these actions could be anything, really. It could be publishing behaviors, it could be pre-registering studies, it could be changing the way you do research to benefit the environment. It could be refusing to accept year-long postdoc contracts. Anything really where we need to kind of band together to have maximum impact, and where you might be feeling that one person doing something is just a drop in the ocean and isn't powerful enough to make a difference. So that is the general pitch for the project. If anyone have any questions, please put them in the Ask a Question box, and I'll attend to them when we get a second. But with that introduction, I thought I would throw it over to everyone else. And what I was thinking we could do is have everyone just say who you are and possibly where you're from or where you're based, and suggest at a minimum raise one behavior that you would like to see change in academia. And I realized I should go first because I didn't actually introduce myself. So my name's Cooper Snout. I'm a recently graduated PhD. Is the audio not great on this? That's a shame. Understandable, yeah, but not great. Okay, sorry about that. It might just be, okay, Vittorio's, it's okay for Vittorio. It might just be my microphone here, so we'll see how everyone else goes. But I guess with that, maybe I'll just throw it over to everyone else. And I don't know who wants to go first, but then we can at least see if it's just my audio or everyone's. So would anyone like to go first?
I'm happy to talk first, Cooper, if that's good. So hello, I'm Charlotte Ray from the University of Sussex in the UK, and I gave an OSR Emergent session on Monday about the potential environmental impacts of open neuroimaging. And as a result, Cooper's invited me to join today. We're all here with an open science hat on, but it may well be that we can use this kind of collective action model in academia for environmental actions. And there are a few we can consider. Probably the most obvious one is reducing aviation. And until the present circumstances befell us, it was possibly rather unusual to consider reducing your carbon footprint by limiting the amount of flying you were doing. Now that we've all seen it's possible to at least have some interactions without flying in the academic community, maybe there will be more appetite for this. But I think it is certainly true that it's easier for PIs to take a strong stance about not flying. Professor Chris Summerfield at Oxford, I think, is one recent example, but it's harder for ECRs. And so this kind of collective action model may be more advantageous for helping ECRs to take that very bold step of saying, I want to reduce the amount of flying I'm doing. Some of what I talked about on Monday was around the sustainability impacts of open science and the potential footprint that comes from sharing data, but also from acquiring magnetic resonance imaging or MEG data that has a footprint too. For me here, the situation's a bit less clear-cut to establish what sort of precise action we would need to take to minimise our environmental impact. But I'd love to hear from the audience. In the polls, ask a question as Cooper's flagged, and my hope is that with the new OHBM Environment Special Interest Group I'm setting up, that may be another platform by which we can amplify a collective action campaign around environmental actions in academia. And I've got one other comment to make, which is that Cooper and I are both involved in an environmental protest movement called Extinction Rebellion. And this is very much also founded on collective action, and it's a mass participatory movement of non-violent direct action and civil disobedience. There are many other examples of this from history, such as Gandhi's struggle for Indian independence. And it works by involving lots of people, because then when you see other people willing to sit in roads, it means you're willing to also come and sit alongside them. And I can say, having taken part in this, that when you see a diverse group of people taking this action rather than just privileged, powerful individuals like white, cis, male PIs, then it starts to bring the whole community on board. So that's my piece, and we should move on to others probably.
Thanks, Charlotte. Who's next? I can nominate people. Tibor, would you like to go?
Yep, I'm happy to go next. Hello, my name is Tibor Auer. I'm a research fellow at the University of Surrey in UK, and I'm working on methods a lot, and now brain modulation and some open science initiatives, Strike the Bits and the NIDM. And my colleagues here about changing the publishing, and probably I think my call is a little bit more technology than cultural, but I hope to achieve it through a cultural change. So probably all of you, all of us, has done peer review, and I'm still a bit annoyed by the technological setback of the peer review system. So it's still like using copy paste with unformatted text, and I think it still dates back from the paper-based peer review area. But so it's not just about how to make the peer review bit more convenient, although I think in general the peer review process could be rewarding. So probably I'm not alone if I'm saying that sometimes the peer review is like burden us, and not something which we do it willingly. There's no reward, or not much reward for it, but it's still something which we have to do because it's part of the system, part of the process. So I thought if there's a way to make it a bit more pleasant or more even fun, if it would be updated both technologically, and then just like, for example, internet as a technological advancement brought up the open science, because I think without internet there wouldn't be open science. The same way it could employed on the peer review process as well. So on the GitHub issue, I already put a comment with a few suggestions how I would like to see the peer review system changed. And one is, for example, the simplest one is just simply allow formatted options, like, for example, Markdown during peer review, using some annotations, text, live documents, even Jupyter, for example, as part of the process. And on the next level, the system should allow the publishing of the peer review along with the paper, and some journals already did this, like, for example, Frontiers. But these peer reviews could be itself also like a cited or citable document. So in this case, the peer review itself could be considered like a scientific contribution. Sometimes it is. I mean, obviously there are sometimes peer reviews which are just some minimum, probably because people are knowledge just simply write, oh, I'm happy with how it goes. But sometimes the peer review is the reviewer also has some scientific contribution to the paper. And at some point, then on the next level, the whole peer review process can lead to a reviewer's co-authorship or collaboration, and maybe could be incorporated into the credit system when it could be properly acknowledged and annotated what the reviewer did. And again, on the next level, the peer review shouldn't stop until the publication, but also after the publication, which is called the post-publication review. And again, it would make the whole publication more alive, not just you put out some paper and maybe no one will read it. It's a little bit also goes back to sustainability, because we produce tons of publications in each year. And some of them just sitting somewhere in the internet, maybe no one's read it. But if this whole publication would not just be like the end process of the scientific work, but full incorporated into it and part of communication, we don't necessarily need a lengthy publication of 5,000, 10,000 words with a long introduction and even longer discussions. When the actual work, the most important part, at least when I usually focused on, is the methods and the results section. And now in these parts could be also more linked with some semantic web technologies, which could facilitate the liveliness of the publication.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'll very briefly say that the way I kind of started this project was dreaming up sort of what the end goal could be, and then trying to work out what are the actual actions we can take. And so what I've put there for your sort of actions that we could actually take is supporting journals that use the credit system, because you touched on that. And then also potentially using Jupyter to record or analyze, record the analysis of our data. But in thinking about these behaviors, it's really good to sort of focus on an individual behavior that we could ask people to do, because that'll give them something to latch onto, I guess, and something that they can actually take action on and do. So I've added reduce aviation for Charlotte and acquire less data, both of those for Charlotte, and then use Jupyter and also the credit system for Tibor. Does maybe Elke, did you want to go next and tell us what you did?
Sure. So I'll keep it relatively brief, otherwise we fill up the whole hour with just our intros. So briefly, I'm a researcher at the Dobbs Institute in the Netherlands, which is where I met Cooper, and I was honored to witness the birth of Project FOC when Cooper was visiting the numbers. So kind of, I agree with all that's been said, and there are many other things that I'd like to change, but since we were asked to highlight one thing in specific, my main gripe with academia and academic publishing is the funneling of funds away from publicly funded research into private enterprises. And I think that's quite a big thing, of course. But I think it's one of the most important ones. Like everything, it's at least partly about money. So if I want to make this very concrete, what I think would be good is if people just stop publishing in very expensive journals, which is like a very concrete kind of guideline. Like if you look up publishing fees and it's maybe 2,500, which actually by now I would think, well, that's actually not too bad. But then you have to add another 2,000 to make something open access. I think that's really outrageous. So yeah, I would say people just stop publishing in very expensive journals. That would already solve quite a bit, I think. All right.
Thank you, Elke. I put stop publishing in expensive journals. That's very clear.
I have to say, I probably still publish in very expensive journals, but that's the thing about the collective action, right?
Yes,
Okay.
That's the thing. None of us can take the action ourselves. But if we all do it, then we can all stop publishing in expensive journals. Who else? Who would like to go next? Just a brief introduction of yourself and then an action that you would like people to see people adopt.
So, okay, I'll put up my hand as the oldie here. That's all right. Yeah, so Tom Johnston. I am a professor at Swinburne University of Technology, and I run the Brain Imaging Centre at our university. I'm kind of here because I want to know, I guess, what more senior people and PIs and so forth can do to support a lot of these campaigns, and also to figure out if there are campaigns at senior PIs that can be directed at senior PIs. I'm well aware, for example, of some of the suggestions have just been made, which I fully support, but of course the burden is being placed in a way on early career researchers, mid-career researchers. And take the case of publishing in expensive journals, for example. On the one hand, ECRs and MCRs don't have the funds often to do that, but secondly, it's really affecting their ability to, get positions, get grants, get promotions, and so forth, if they're not publishing in the journals which are seen as the prestigious or the high impact journals. So I'm still pretty foggy about what could be done, but things along the lines of pledges from PIs to explicitly raise the importance, if you like, or prioritise publishing in open access, low cost journals when assessing candidates for positions, when advertising for positions, so making explicit reference to open science, making explicit reference as part of the job selection criteria to the different aspects of open science, so publishing code, publishing in open access, non-commercial journals, and so forth. Because if they're made explicit in the job selection criteria, which everybody can see, then you have to follow through. In most jurisdictions, you have to follow through on those job selection criteria when you're assessing candidates. So that's one way in which perhaps we could do a campaign that's directed more towards people in my role who put together or can influence the job selection criteria. And I would say the same for any other sorts of schemes that are involved in, whether if we're involved in adjudicating or setting up grant applications, then that would be another way in which we could perhaps create some change at that level. So there are two ideas, and maybe the third one that I'll say is that for those of us who if you like, have some sort of guardianship or ability to provide access to expensive technologies, such as imaging centres, perhaps we can pledge to provide a certain amount of time or access on those facilities for ECRs, MCRs who adopt open science practices. So that's also something concrete that we could do, basically saying, if you're going to do all this good stuff, we're going to support you by providing you with effectively free hours on our facilities. So there are some ideas.
Thanks, Tom. I'm trying to put these in as a poll.
Oh, so sorry.
If you were to express, the idea is that if we can put a number of behaviours that people could take, and I'm thinking specifically researchers that could take these behaviours.
Yes.
So I'm trying to think how to sort of reframe the issues that you raise as actions that we researchers could band together and take. And I guess in the first case, you were talking about sort of putting pressure on unis to not judge in the way that they currently do. So I guess
I guess I'm even going beyond that. I'm saying, what if we aim a campaign at senior researchers, senior PIs who actually put together the job descriptions and the job criteria and so forth, and say, I pledge to make sure that certain open science practices are on the selection criteria. So in any positions that I'm involved in advertising or putting together the job criteria.
Okay, great.
So,
I'll put as
does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's great to think about who is the target audience for a campaign, and it can be specific to guys, or it can be specific to ECRs or whatever achieves the goals. I'll try and think about how to word that one as
needs work, obviously. Yeah.
No, it's great. I'll try and think about how to word that as possibly Daniel introduces himself next. Right. Thanks, Tom.
So hello, thanks for organizing this, and thanks for being here. I'm Daniele Marinazzo. I'm a professor of neuroimaging data analysis at University of Ghent, Belgium. And since a few years, I invest also a lot of my time in trying to improve the current publishing ecosystem. So I am one of the editors-in-chief of Neuron's behavioral data analysis analysis and theory, which I will now link in the Crowdcast chat. I will also link some other initiative that we did on Crowdcast to answer some questions that you might have. So the MBDT is an overlay community journal. I will not spend maybe too much time here to describe this. Maybe you can then go there yourself if you're curious. But basically, it has a very wide editorial board of more than 100 people from different fields in neuroscience and artificial intelligence. And we are definitely willing to increase the editorial board if some part of the community feels underrepresented. This is important because let's say the sole criterion for considering a paper for MBDT is if any of the editors is interested enough on the paper that would like to discuss them in a journal club or in an informal discussion with colleagues or lab members. So it's a quite wide criterion, and the idea is that we authors submit a paper on arXiv. Now we are working for inclusion with other preprint servers, and then they reach out to the editors, and the first interested editor then takes care of finding reviewers. Reviews are published together with the papers, and it's an overlay journal, so the paper will continue to live on arXiv, even though they are linked then on the main page of the journal. And the cost for publishing is $10, basically the price for buying a DOI for identification, let's say. This said, we need to make this work. So we need to convince ourselves that once we pass the hopefully high bar of putting our work out there on a preprint server, then we want it to be disseminated in the best and more ethical and sustainable way. And so we should go beyond our constraints of, okay, I have to publish in a more recognized journal, I have to publish in a journal which has a high impact factor. So in order to progress and to reach as fast as possible what all of us already and many of us already pledged before me. The idea is that if we have to make a campaign to make this possible, we need to act at least on 3 levels. We need to act as authors, we need to act as reviewers, and then we need to act as parts of an institution. So you could choose whether one every X papers that you produce, try to submit it to a sustainable journal. I would say MBDT, but any other alternative, of course, would be welcome. The second one, as a reviewer, you could say, well, of each of any of 2 reviewers reviews I'm invited to give, I will decline it if it's for legacy journal, if I would have otherwise accepted it, and on the other hand, review a preprint on a public platform like Papier or already on bioRxiv, etc. This is the second pledge. And the third one could be go and talk to your librarian and ask them how they could better promote this type of journal, and to pitch the idea that even if we cancel subscriptions, the world will not fall upon our heads. And on the other hand, if we abandon the gold open access and we go towards using the money for maintaining a more sustainable platform, then we will together reach a better place in a fast way. So I will link now to a talk I made to the OpenMR Benelux event in January, where all these ideas are better laid out with some links and together with the crowdcast question and answers that we held back in May. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, I think those are really great behaviors that we could adopt. So what I've put there is publish in community-owned journals like in NBDT and review for community-owned journals as well. I've also put ask librarians to support community-owned journals. My understanding from talking with librarians is they're kind of as hamstrung as we are, because they're kind of, they're beholden to us, really. And so my impression is that they would happily, more than happily, support these journals and not stock the other journals, but unfortunately that's just not the reality of their situation. And just so everyone knows, I'm creating this poll that I'll post after everyone's done the introductions, and then everyone can vote at the end just for which one we workshop in the remaining minutes. Perhaps Kelly and Chris, would you like to just briefly introduce yourselves and say a behaviour that you'd like to see change?
Yes, sure. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all. So I think you could possibly append mine at the end of Danielle's, because it's a very simple low bar behaviour that can promote community-owned journals or open source journals. So I was inspired by, I think it was in the House of Representatives, female attendees were finding it hard to get their points acknowledged by their male peers. And so they basically came up with a strategy. I can't remember what they called it now, but essentially they would echo each other's viewpoints. So someone would say, as my colleague said, this is the point they made. And they found it was very effective. And so I thought how we could translate that to our current situation is we all present papers in journal clubs, in lab meetings, and we could very simply refuse to present papers from journals that are from publishers such as Elsevier. And we could say, as a community, we're going to talk about work from community-owned journals or open source journals to each other. And that's it. So everyone can participate. It's not going to affect anyone's career directly, but it is going to raise the profile of the journals that are doing a good job and the work in them.
Are we back?
I think so. Can everyone hear us? Can you hear us there? Okay, thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, go on, Chris.
Yeah, sorry, quickly. So my interest is largely a little more technical. I see one of the things that I like my long-term interest is in more democratizing the entire review process and the editorial process of journals themselves. And I think this can be done from a technical perspective just by providing the correct platform for this sort of thing. And it's basically the idea being that there's a lot of power in the hands of editors at the moment to kind of filter papers based on their interpretation of reviews and this sort of thing. And I think largely, I think it was Tibor saying earlier that the whole review process doesn't necessarily need to stop just after a paper is published. And if you allow people to continue to review and in fact be able to review reviews and so on, then you can establish a kind of reputation in a community for how well basically how well a person's opinion is provided to each paper or to each output. And I think to begin with, just using these open reviewing platforms that already exist is a good way to do this. But I think in the long run, a better technical solution to basically provide a reviewing platform on top of something like a community journal like NBDT or something like that, where you could just continually provide better and better metadata about each paper or each contribution is a way to move forward to get away from the power held by editors and senior reviewers and that sort of thing.
Can I briefly ask a question? Would that also make sense to have that as a platform on top of preprint servers rather than on top of even community journals?
Yeah, well, I think that would then even remove the need for the community journals themselves, right? Eventually, it can just be preprints and whatever. And in fact, the technical aspect of it, and one of the other problems is that all of our outputs are like still based in like archaic text and static image format, and theoretically, there's nothing to stop us from getting richer than that, right? And then we can get away from even preprint servers, right, and have just DOI'd actual rich media. And I think that's obviously the way forward in the long run. We're a while away from that, though, I think.
No, and sorry, mate, what do you want? Yeah, so Vinod will talk about that in a second, actually. So he's, I think, going to touch on a platform called Pre-Review, which is, I think, a really exciting development, which is basically a preprint review platform. And I'm just going to try and share my screen because I was having troubles letting Vinod share his. So just give me 1 second, and then I can take you through those slides.
Okay, while the slides are getting there, வணக்கம், அனைவருக்கும் வணக்கம். என் பெயர் வினோத் இளங்கோவன். நான் மூளை மற்றும் நேர காட்டியின் ஆராய்ச்சியை உயிர் மருத்துவ அறிவியலாக நான் புரிகிறேன். நான் தமிழ் மொழியில் பேசுகிறேன், ஆனால் ஆங்கிலத்தில் சிந்திக்கிறேன் நரம்பியலை பற்றியும். I just said that my name is Vinod. I'm a neuroscientist, and I speak the language Tamil, but I think in language English. And this exactly shows that language is not a barrier for participation. It's a tool and means to contribute and communicate. The slides would come, but I just wanted to show that because of the colonialism that has happened in the history, and now the knowledge producers are kind of skewed towards the global north or the Western or the Anglo-centric world, while you would see that we could maybe go to the next slide where you could see there's a skew of the scholarly content that is produced. So where you could kind of appreciate that only the global north is highly represented as the knowledge producer, whereas the rest of the world is considered as the knowledge consumers. But indeed, the indigenous communities and the tribal communities across the world have been producing a lot of knowledge, not only about things of water management and so on, but also theories about brain and things like that. One of the reasons why we even talk about this is to also appreciate the fact that scholarship is not just an intellectual exercise. It is humans coming together with other humans in order to study the life of humans, and we bring our own selves and representing our own selves here.
The slides are not showing on Crowdcast.
That is
unfortunate.
Sorry, Vinod, I didn't actually prep for slides with this method, but perhaps you could just talk us through what you're going to say. Is that okay?
Yes, I will take you through this, and then I will share also the slides through Figshare, so that way, that will be available for you to see later. So the next point that I wanted to emphasize is that scholarship is, just not an intellectual exercise, but it's we humans working together with humans in a collaborative way. And when we all talk about, we want to avoid one particular type of publisher. We don't want to talk about articles that are published in those journals. That's well and good, but there are already platforms that exist to do that. For example, preprints bring in equity, diversity, and inclusion of scholarly content. We have a lot of preprint servers, and the preprints are posted. The number of preprints posted across neuroscience has been increasing. You have Twitter boards that actually tweet papers about neuroscience and so on. So we are in the advent of technology, and we haven't realized how to use that in a way that everyone could participate. We are constantly excluding certain communities from participating in the dialogue of knowledge production, also within the neuroscience community. Although the neuroimaging community or the neuroscience community in general is dominated or predominated by English-speaking population, or everyone else in the other parts of the globe has adapted in order to communicate with English. That is not the primary language or lingua franca of many other nations or many other scientists who collaborate in doing that. I don't mean to say that we need to diversify and then publish things in different language, but we could use platforms that actually bridge this gap. And the way one could review preprints is using the idea that was actually floated by Kelly, where you could use journal clubs as a platform. So you could discuss articles that are posted as preprints because they have not been pre-reviewed earlier. So you could use journal clubs as a platform in order to peer review and train yourself as a peer reviewer, because there are several things you can get trained as a good peer reviewer or quality peer reviewer, because most often we don't get training on peer review, but that occupies part of our everyday workflow. It takes time to read that article, and then it takes time to get back to those reviewers with very critical and constructive comments in a civil way. This is something that not all of us have got used to us from reviewer number 2, because we're all angry with that, or that reviewer number 2 is angry with us. Pre-review is a platform where one could use to amplify preprints by basically using journal clubs, a live stream journal club, or even a small group journal club within the lab or within the workspace or the department, and provide critical constructive feedback back to the authors. That way, authors are encouraged to post more preprints later on. And in particular, my campaign would be to amplify the preprints, or amplify the words of women, Black, queer, Indigenous, and person of color who have been authors, either as lost authors or as primary authors. So that would actually, we're all now talking about just changing the system in terms of very global north or very global, the whole Anglo-centric view. But I think it needs to be brought into attention that the neuroscience community is a global community. And if you're not including everyone into the equity, where we want to change the system, but we want to only provide equitable access to certain people, that's not going to happen. When we want to change things, we need to change it for the better. Finally, I'd like to let you know that the collective actions can only result when individuals take certain actions. And it's in your hand to actually take the right action, where you start the dialogue of, having a journal club in your department or in your lab, and also talking with your supervisors on what can be done with this preprint and how does that impact your work, and can you include that in your work by citing that preprint for your next grant or next article that you're writing, and so on. So looking at preprints should not just be stopping at tweeting it and reading it and so on, but it should also, the scholarly dialogue or the scholarly process need to be integrated into it. That brings me to the whole point of opening up scholarship or opening up research beyond the things that we see. It's just not about the preprints. It's just not about the data and the codes that we share. At every stage of the research cycle, starting from the hypothesis, for example, registered reports, until the point we get into a finalized output as a preprint, and then constantly discussions on that, and then people keep on evaluating, saying that method doesn't work, this doesn't work in this context, and so on. That needs to keep on evolving, and all of those steps needs to be opened up. With that, I would close, and I would just say my campaign would be to amplify the products or the research outputs of underrepresented minorities. Thank you, Cooper, and thank you everyone for this wonderful discussion.
Thanks, Vinod. That's awesome. Yeah, I really like that idea. I think we have to actively amplify these voices. And I think I have a hashtag for you, Black Words Matter. But I mean, okay, so that was 50 minutes. And to be honest, I kind of imagined introductions taking sort of 20 minutes, and then we would hash out some campaigns. But I think this is actually a great demonstration that there is such a wide range of issues that we're all interested in, and really so many problems that we could be making progress on if we can band together and create that cultural change. So I think, there's another technical problem. Sorry about the slides not working, Vinod. But I also had started typing in the behaviors as a poll, and I've realized now that when you have multiple people logged in as the official account, it overrides the poll that you were previously making. So there are 6 in there that we could vote on to work on. But I think that given that we only have kind of 10 minutes left, probably what might be more constructive is for me to share some lessons that I've learned over the last year, having hosted a few campaigns, and the feedback that I've received from the community about what's gone wrong, why they haven't taken flight, and what I would like to do with the platform moving forward. If people go to the platform, you can see a box down there, just for your knowledge. You can click and explore the platform. But what you see in there is 3 campaigns, and they were all based around open access, because that was what got me interested in this question in the first place. And I originally imagined those campaigns as a kind of sign up, 30% of your field or something, like a really huge number, a large enough number that it would you would have the protection of your community and be able to change your behavior to only support journals XYZ and no longer support the Elsevier's or the Nature's or the other expensive commercially owned journals. What I've learned through this process is, and the feedback that I've received, is that having really big, grand vision dreams like that is a bit too intangible for people. And so what I've realized since is that it probably makes more sense to have a small scale achievable goal. And so what I mean by that is something that's very tangible. So part of the feedback I've had is it's very unclear to work out what this pledge actually means. Like what journals am I pledging to support? And so it would be very beneficial when thinking about these campaigns to have a very specific action. And that might be something like to post a preprint, or it might be to do one pre-registered study, or it might be to complete a review on pre-review, or it might be to, say, not fly to conferences for the next year. So something that's very tangible and people can grasp and get their head around what they're being asked to do. The second thing that I've learned is that having that kind of huge threshold that we're aiming to achieve is just, people just kind of tune out and go, well, it's probably never going to happen. And they might be right with that attitude, but probably what is more productive, I think, is to have a really small number that is more achievable. So in those examples that I gave, like say the preprint campaign, it might be that we ask people, we might just look for 100 people to post a preprint. And it might not seem like that's having much effect because maybe those people were going to post preprints already. But the idea is that this concept that is completely scalable. So if we can kind of demonstrate some small scale wins where we show that we can achieve actions, we can band together and we can create some very small difference, then that creates a motivation to create a bigger campaign with grander vision and more effect that we can have in the system. And there's probably some other lessons, but I think those are the 2 main guidelines that I would give for sort of trying to develop a campaign if people are interested in developing these campaigns with the platform. So I guess with that, what would be great is to open it up to the crowd as well. If anyone has any suggestions for behaviors that they would like to see go onto the platform. And yeah, I think we're probably not going to get time to workshop any specific ideas unless there's something that, let me see what the polls are doing. Okay, so there is currently 1 vote for reducing aviation. So if people want to like just quickly kind of vote what campaigns they would like to see happen, you'll only get 1 vote. But if you could do it now, oh, you can't see the poll. How about now?
Can't see either, actually.
There it is. Okay, sorry, it wasn't visible. And I have to apologize. There's only 6 there, so we didn't actually. I'm going to add publish in NBDT because that's my favorite campaign idea.
Meanwhile, can I maybe say something about the last one you mentioned about the smaller campaigns, right? So
yes.
An idea, which is not, this is not really about what should we strive for in terms of campaigns, but maybe how to strive for it. If the platform, like the website platform, becomes more of like a buffet of stuff we can choose that that would provide like a small steps towards improving academia, that might be an option, right? Now there's like 3 levels you can pledge at, but if there's maybe like 15 things you can choose, and some of them are a very low threshold, like if 500 people pledge to always publish a preprint, then I will do so as well. That would be very doable, right? And that could generate some momentum for the bigger ones to kick off as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great point. And yeah, I kind of see this potentially evolving into a kind of shopping mall for behavioral change, because I think what we're touching on here with this discussion is that all of these issues are interrelated, and the more you dive into open science, you realize that the issue that I care about is very related to the issue that you may care about, and progressing one issue can really help us move the whole field forward on other issues. And there's so much overlap that if you're interested in preprints, you're probably also interested in reviewing preprints. So if we can set it up as a sort of smorgasbord of behavioral change, then hopefully that creates a lot of crossover between the campaigns and sort of cross-fertilizes participation. So I guess that's the kind of, the dream that I would love this platform to turn into. Sin has posted that it's up now. So looks like we've got a clear win for open science hiring. And that's great. That's an idea that I definitely hadn't thought of. And I love the idea of targeting PIs. And I love that it's come from a professor of neuroimaging, Tom. So thank you for that suggestion. So we're probably going to have to wrap it up. Does anyone have any sort of final comments or thoughts that they'd like to raise before we do?
Just a couple of things I'd like to say. First of all, I think we just agreed we'd like to start a preprint journal club. So thanks, Vinod. That was really inspiring. And then, so Koops, what would your ideal next steps for us to be? What are they? So should we chat more and perhaps maybe concentrate on campaigns, or should we all launch our campaign on POC? Like, what was your vision for that?
Yeah, great question. Thanks. The obstacle right now is actually development. So the platform is pretty much built, but it's built to host the type of open access campaign that I originally put up there. So as you can see, there's a lot of flexibility and different features that different campaigns would need that we can develop. And so the platform needs kind of just a tiny bit of work, probably a few hours of development to be flexible enough to host these different types of campaigns. Then ideally the vision would be that we could open it up to anyone and anyone could propose their own campaign, kind of like Kickstarter. The user can come along and create their own campaign and then just pitch it and put it out in the community. And then hopefully drive it themselves. Obviously we'll do what we can from the platform end, but there are already established communities working towards these ends, like ASAP Bio is very into preprints. And so those communities already exist. So hopefully we can partner with them and drive these campaigns and get them to a point where they reach threshold and then create some change. I think that's
very concretely, you mentioned development is a need. So is there I probably should know this, but I'm going to ask. So is there a GitHub that is open and that people can send pull requests to if they want to contribute?
There sure is. I put it at the very beginning of this thread, but I'll post it again. Yeah, there's my cry for help. It should be in the chat box now. But yeah, there is a GitHub, and you'll go through there, and if you take a look, you'll see that it's quite developed, and it's all openly available. So if anyone out there is interested and would like to help out, please get in touch, because that's really the next obstacle in getting this project moving forward. We're getting server error. Sorry, Claire. Great. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us. It was really great to hear your perspectives and ideas on campaigns moving forward. And I think if anyone's interested in working on any of the ideas that were raised, please get in touch with myself or any of the panel members, and we can start workshopping them and hopefully create some change. Thank you, everyone.